The get on with it phase of Series 10 continues today as we review Eaters of Shite. I almost called it by its name there, and that is simply unacceptable. But this is one of the single most forgettable episodes of Doctor Who ever made. I think this is the only Series 10 episode where the only thing I can think of for a preamble is that this episode is just a prime example of how half-arsed this series was, since no one told the writer how to write the 12th Doctor currently, and she just wrote him as his Series 8 self. And speaking of the writer for this episode, this is the only time for New Who that a classic Who writer was brought into the episode. And the writer they chose was Rona Munro, who I hope I'm not butchering your name, who wrote Survival. Survival is utter wank that people only like because of the themes. Bearing in mind, I haven't watched that story in over a year at this point, and I don't intend on ever visiting again anytime soon, but it definitely does not give me hope for reviewing this story. Not that I had any to begin with, but you know what I mean. Let's just get this over with so I can review the finale sooner. The episode begins with two little shits on a hill, and one of them wants to listen to music from underground, and the other one doesn't want to be blamed for her death. Relatable. And then a crow starts saying Doctor before the titles roll. My interest in this episode is already so high I can barely contain myself. The episode starts off with Nardole being annoying about the vault. And now that we're here, there's fucking 3 episodes left of the series including this one. I am at my fucking wit's end with this bullshit. Usually I don't mind this stuff because Matt Lucas at least delivers it in an interesting way, and it can lead into Nardole annoying the Doctor, which is funny. But here Nardole is just fucking whinging about it, but is clearly dressed for the occasion. And as he says in a most likely ADR line, he wasn't complaining when he went to Mars, was he? Fucking dumbass, fucking vault, fucking bullshit, fucking vault, fucking piece of shit! So the Doctor and Bill bicker about who knows more about Romans, and they split up to try and find out who's right, while we get random annoying interjection from Nardole. Please, for the love of God, do not make Nardole an annoying character. He's the character who's had the least issues out of the main 3 this series. Don't make me dislike him now. So Bill sees someone crying and says she's going to honour her clearly dead relatives, and just stares at her blankly until she activates sicko mode, and starts screaming and charging towards her. And we get the New Who equivalent of corridor surfing until Bill falls down another hole. Luckily not a 400-foot drop fall, but you would have thought that at this point this dumbass would have learned to look where she's fucking walking, after she inexplicitly survived that last fall. After an utterly pointless conversation about crows, we cut back to Bill realizing that the TARDIS translates everything into English. It took her 10 fucking episodes to even question this. Ugh. So we see how the obvious mystery creature kills people in this episode, which does admittedly look interesting.
Just want to go back to bed.
Most relatable thing you've said all series. I can already tell the differences in bad between this and Empress of Mars. With Empress of Mars, the whole thing fundamentally just didn't function and played out in such a typical way that it just made it so uninteresting to watch. But with this, probably because it was written by a classic Who writer, it just feels very slow and very poorly paced and boring. Like, we're currently 7.5 minutes in and practically nothing has happened, compared to the first 5 minutes of Empress of Mars, which was just awful. I'm beginning to wish that this series wasn't the series I chose to do every episode first. At least if I did Series 9 first, the review of the series opener would have been more entertaining, because I would have just been angrier. But with obvious filler trash like Empress of Mars and Eaters of Shite, there's just nothing to get angry at because the episodes are just such empty hollows of shite. So they find a pile of bodies.
Not always fun to be right.
Then why did you choose to come here in the first place, you brainlet? Bill and generic Roman try and find other Romans before the terrible CGI monster consumes the Roman, because Bill is fucking immortal. So Bill obviously escapes, and we see that one of the Romans is played by Brian Vernal, who I recognise because he was in The Force Awakens for about half a second. So the Doctor and Nardole get surrounded by dumbasses who continue to be dumb until we see some refreshingly Chad 12 confrontation seemingly out of nowhere. This is what we call inconsistent character writing. But honestly here, I don't even fucking care at this point because It's just such a nice contrast to the sometimes bored Capaldi of this series. One of the most consistently inconsistent main characters this show has ever seen finally returning to his best form, his pure Series 8 form, of just being a Chad 24/7, and I'm all for it. That doesn't detract from how funny it is that the writer didn't do proper research on this character, but you know.
Yes, but she's not a warrior, she's an embryo. What did you do? Throw your action figures out?
Listen, Roman.
I miss Series 8. And it isn't even good. That's how bad this era has been. Poor Capaldi. After a whole bunch of exposition about how evil Romans are, the Doctor uses the popcorn that Nardole used in a shitty joke earlier to escape by throwing it on the fire, which is pretty clever to be fair. The Doctor then slightly goes in one of the gates for about half a second, which keeps him in there for 2 days, which not only doesn't actually make sense, but we both know it was just an excuse for the writer to not have to work out a way for Nardole to become part of the Scottish team in a natural way, so she just skips over it completely. And people wonder why I stopped watching Classic Who. So the Romans also had some lovely time skip development and now are very fond of Bill. So fond of her, in fact, to the point where one of them has a crush on her. Haven't we done this before? And once again, I'm not going to act as if I blame the guy, but bro, we're fucking 10 episodes into Series 10, and instead of giving her any more character writing, the writers are just reminding us that she's a lesbian. We fucking get it! Tell us something more about the character! Remember the potential for an interesting story with Bill and her foster mum, since they clearly have a rocky relationship, and despite the fact that she raised her, she still didn't know that Bill was a lesbian? Yeah, me neither. But one thing that's impossible to forget is that Bill is a fucking lesbian! This was established in the first episode of the series. You don't need to bonk us over the head about it when you're sacrificing what could have been an interesting scene just to remind us that this series has had the first gay companion. We could have had a conversation about the Empire, what life as a soldier's like. Anything! Hell, it could have actually caused a nice juxtaposition between that and the British Empire, which, while not very deep, was explored in the last episode a bit. I swear down, Series 10 just tries its best to be bland. So the Doctor roasts Carr again, yeah, that's actually her name, about not being prepared to fight the monster in an admittedly hilarious way before we cut back to Bill, and the sexuality conversation, which felt so out of touch and disconnected from any normal conversation about this stuff ever, that you can tell that this was written by a boomer.
I don't like men.
Me neither.
We can be friends, though. It did save your life. That means we're friends forever.
Yeah, but...
This is dialogue delivered with no sense of self-awareness whatsoever, and it makes me want to chew on metal pipes. So we find out how Carr released the Eater of Shite like an absolute dumbass, as the Doctor puts it.
To protect a muddy little hillside, you doomed your whole world.
I feel so much sympathy for her character already. So Bill convinces the Romans that the Doctor is capable of stopping the beast in the speech you've heard a million times before, but here, it's done much worse in a scene that drags on for far too long. We are now more than halfway through this episode, by the way, and there's been this little to say about it. What a fucking bland slog this has been. So the Doctor has a nice conversation to Carr about mourning only when the time is right, before we get a pointless, dull action scene. Then the Romans meet the barbarians and they have a big cringe interaction, which thankfully is resolved by them realizing that they sound like children, which is a nice contrast to the shitty, stupid conflict in Empress of Mars. And this is made even better by Chad 12 returning.
String each other till no one is left standing, or you grow the hell up!
We really went from that to the 13th Doctor. Speaking of 13, at the time of this being written, episode 2 of Flux is out, and it is bad. But it might actually be the only Chibnall story I enjoy, despite its glaring flaws, which is a nice change of pace. I mean, War of the Sontarans is better than Eaters of Shite, so that's a plus, I guess. Anyway, speaking of Eaters of Light, after the Doctor gives a speech convincing the two to work together, they do. In a one conversation scene, the scene gets set up. How interesting. There's only 10 minutes left, I need to power through this. After Nardole has a conversation with the Crow, which is definitely a scene that exists, The monster arrives and they shine light torches at it until the Doctor pushes it into the void and goes to sacrifice himself until the Romans and the barbarians work to do it themselves. I honestly have nothing to say. This episode has just been a long collection of scenes with very little to no substance at all, just happening one after the other. So this really is just a classic Who story. So the building collapses and I guess that's just the story over. Wow, what an absolute waste of time. I, and whomever it may concern, have learned and achieved absolutely fuck all from this episode. Seriously, at least Empress of Mars was funny and how bad and predictable gata shitty it was. This episode is just bland, dull, boring, uneventful, flat, sterile, tedious, monotonous, stiff, and just dusty. What a waste of time for everyone involved. Seriously, ignoring the Missy scene at the end, this is legit a 36-minute long episode. What is this fucking Disney Plus tier trash? So they waltz back in the TARDIS after a boring discussion, only to find Missy is there. Because the Doctor is an absolute fucking dopey twat, and thought it was a good idea to let her just chill and do maintenance in the TARDIS. What?
What?
You.
Well, seriously? What, was she doing chores for you now?
Regenerate, come on.
I'll spend the rest of my life imprisoned with you. I refuse.
I'm sure the Master is fine with doing literal, actual chores for the rest of her life to try and be good. There's nothing I hate more than how this series writes the Master. Both of them.
Seriously? Why did you let her out?
I think you may be forgetting how we got home from Mars.
Yeah, plot contrivance, don't remind me. It's actually so fucking stupid that we went from the Doctor shocks she's in the TARDIS to she lives in it to she's trying to be the Doctor within 3 episodes. And there's pretty much no proper connection between any of this shit at all. It's almost as if Missy's will she won't she bullshit arc is really half-arsed and poorly thought out and developed.
Did you watch us?
Some of it, a little bit.
What did you think?
Oh, is she reviewing us now?
Never mind, I like her again. She's based. So we get another scene of Missy crying at what she's done, which was unironically done better in Live the Land than here. Live the Land is still way worse than this episode, but fucking hell. I don't think it would be doing anything better than any other episode. And I honestly hate how this era is sacrificing the Doctor's intelligence again so that scenes like this can exist. Because here, the Doctor is actually reasonable, still being cautious about Missy, but then in the very next episode, he lets his guard down so much and it costs him his fucking life. Fuck my life. Just because he thought Missy was a good person. And because of how easily she can flip between evil and not, it just makes every scene with her so incredibly fucking annoying to watch unfold. So, that was Eaters of Shite. And that was single-handedly one of the single most forgettable episodes of Doctor Who to date. Holy shit, I think the first word that comes to mind when reviewing this episode is substance. Because of the lack of it there is in this one. It's one of the most substanceless episodes ever made. Every scene in this episode just feels hollow and empty because of all the underdeveloped characters and crap humour, filled to the brim with pointless scenes that don't add anything to the story. And if we only include the plot itself, this episode is only 36 minutes long, which is embarrassingly short for a Doctor Who episode. This is up there with The Power of Three as one of the worst paced episodes this show has ever seen. While The Power of Three is really fast paced and then pulls a bullshit ending out of its arse, this episode is incredibly slow, dull, and boring until it just anticlimactically ends when it feels like it only just started. Isn't there another episode which is awfully paced like that in this series which also has the word shite in the title? I actually don't really like that I wrote that into the script because that applies to so many episodes. I don't know which one I was referring to. This is one of those episodes that I don't think I would ever recommend to anyone ever because there really is just nothing to it. The only real positive this episode has to it that's not insultingly bad is that Capaldi acts like his Series 8 self. But besides that, this is a nothing burger of an episode that I don't think I'll ever watch again. Because if I wanted to see Capaldi at his funniest in the role, I'd just watch Series 8. up next is what you'd think would be another good episode of Doctor Who. World Enough and Time. Yeah, I'm coming in with the hot take next week. So Bill sees someone crying, saying that she's going to Oya. Oya?